Got a divisional matchup here. Thursday Night Football has been cooking this season. And we got the Rams versus the Niners. If this one was in LA, if this was a Rams home game, man, I'd feel really good about them. But it's on the road, so you never know what can happen. Carmen, as we always do, start with the matchup that matters. What do you got in this one?
Yeah, we've gotten, I feel like we're like in the upside down this season because these Thursday Night Football games have all been really good lately. And
Phenomenal.
like for the last like half of the season that's gone by already, there's been some incredible games. And I think that this one will be another one because you get division opponents and that's what happens. Things get weird. My matchup that matters for this though is whoever that the Rams decided they're going to attack George Kittle with, because I can tell you how the Bears
Ooh,
decided to do
yeah.
it last week, and it didn't go so well for them. So 6 of the 7 targets that George Kittle received and actually caught, because he caught all 7 of his targets last week, there was either a linebacker or a defensive lineman as the first guy in coverage on George Kittle. And it made no sense. It broke my brain. Even if those were the only 7 plays that George Kittle had a linebacker or a defensive lineman on, Brock Purdy knows George Kittle enough to recognize those mismatches instantaneously. But George Kittle cannot be treated like a normal tight end. He is a receiver. You must treat him like a receiver. He can block, he can be a part of that, but you have to teach him like treat him like a receiver. And a safety is going to have a hard enough time trying to keep up with him, much less a linebacker or a defensive lineman. I swear to you, Zach Pickens had a had a little thing in the stat line that said that he was in coverage on George Kittle according to Next Gen Stats last week. So don't do that. Don't do that, Rams. Just keep a guy on George Kittle that can keep up with him, because Brock Purdy is going to go to him quite a bit, especially with the injuries they have in the run game and how big of a factor George Kittle can be for them,
Well, in
especially.
theory, that's that's what you want out of an elite tight end. Too fast for a linebacker to cover, too big for a
Right,
safety
too
to
big for a
cover.
safety to cover. Exactly.
So George Kittle is the manifestation of that, and he's the highest graded tight end that we have in the league for a reason. I think every single game, you're right, this could be a matchup that matters, but certainly don't do whatever Chicago did last week, because what do you have? What do you have, like 138
He
in the
had
first half alone? It
Yeah,
was
well, he had 115 yards, but he had the touchdown. He caught all 7 of his targets, so that's just it's too much.
on the
Yeah,
on the Rams side of things. My matchup that matters is the 49ers defensive line and just defense in general that's been struggling against the run, trying to contain Kiren Williams. Because when we talk about the Rams, I'll at least mention the wide receivers. I don't know if you're going to mention either of them as your plus factor, but Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, I mean, they've been rolling, especially you look at last week and how this offense played against the Buffalo Bills. I mean, that passing attack was unbelievable. Those 2 wide receivers are 2 of the best in the NFL, if not the best wide receiver duo that we have in the NFL. And the Bills, who are one of the best teams in the league, found that out the hard way last week. And I think they get all the notoriety, but really it's the constant great play of Kiren Williams that gives this team such a high floor every single week to be able to be like, all right, well, we can take a little bit more of risks. We can get a little bit more aggressive in the passing game with these 2 great wide receivers, because we know that Kyron's got us on the early downs. And he's been fantastic. He's had over 1,000 yards already this season. Hasn't had less than 62 rushing yards in any game since September. And on the Niners side of things, 58.3 rushing grade for the Niners defense. That's 30th in the NFL. And so their run defense is just not as good as it needs to be. So I think that if they can contain Kiren Williams at all whatsoever, that would go to their advantage. But here's the other thing. If they can't, I have a hard time believing that they're going to slow down this Rams offense that scored 44 last week against the Bills. Who's your plus factor in this game?
yeah, I am going to the wide receivers, and I have Puka in there, but it's only because he's the one that's actually leading the league in threat percentage, which I know is one of your favorite stats.
Crazy. Yeah.
37.6% threat percentage, but Kupp is third. So you've got 2 of the top 3 guys in threat percentage on this roster. You got to utilize them. They have to be the plus factor here. Quarterbacks, Matthew Stafford has 101.6 passer rating when targeting Puka. And again, when he's targeting Cooper Kupp, 110.6 passer rating. So these are guys that are just extraordinarily productive. They're the backbone of the offense. And when you have a quarterback like Matthew Stafford, who can get the ball out so incredibly quickly, it's just a matter of how much, can these guys take what he's going to give them inevitably and run with it, quite literally.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's going to come down to how this Niners secondary really can contend with them. And they've had injuries all along the defense. You're maybe not going to get the push that you want up front if Nick Bosa is not back yet. It didn't seem to matter against the Chicago Bears last week, but I have to imagine it will matter for the Rams, who have a sneaky good offensive line too. And again, Matthew Stafford, who can get the ball out extraordinarily quickly.
I'm glad that you brought up the offensive line because, I mean, they could have been my plus factor in this one. My plus factor is I went with Matthew Stafford simply because if he's playing the way that he did last week, it's just going to be hard for any team to beat them. I mean, the Bills are one of the best teams in the NFL, and they weren't even able to keep pace with how well Matthew Stafford was playing with a guy like Josh Allen as their quarterback. 35 total dropbacks last week for Matthew Stafford. He was only pressured 9 times in that game. When he was able to be kept clean, which was the majority of the time, 248 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 big-time throws, 94.9 passing grade. I mean, he was just unbelievable last week, especially when he was kept clean. And the offensive line can go a long way into making sure that this passing attack remains potent. Obviously, there's a lot of injuries that's going on with the San Francisco 49ers. Any one of those guys could have been that plus factor. And even if they're out there, we know that they're going to be playing hurt. And so how those guys plays, a lot of those stars, the Trent Williams and Nick Bosa's, Fred Warner's been dealing with an injury all season long. Like, those guys certainly become plus factors. But again, if Matthew Stafford and the offensive line play the way that they did last week, I don't know if it's going to matter. It's in San Francisco, so that's why I give them a little bit of a bump there. But holy cow, I would not want to be playing this Rams team right now. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below, so if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you can become one today.